Hey guys, welcome to the channel. It's John at Matchless Web, and I am joined today by Mr. Shane Bishop. He is the man, the myth, the legend behind the EU Image Optimizer, EWWW Image Optimizer, as well as SWIS. You might make other things too, Shane. Are those your two plugins? Do you have anything more than that?
There's about half a dozen of them now. I adopted the Insanity plugin that some people might have heard of. It's got about 300,000 users after Jason Hinkle passed away a few years ago. It didn't have a maintainer, so I took that over to keep it running. And initially that was the idea. Now I've improved it a little bit here and there, and yeah, it's pretty slick.
Yeah, look at you go. And we were just chatting about this just before we started recording, but Shane, go ahead and just tell us how many active users you've got according to WordPress for the image optimizer.
Currently for the EU Image Optimizer, there's over 900,000 active sites using the free plugin. So yeah, pretty amazing.
That is mind-boggling. I just can't imagine. That's crazy. And that's just the free, and I know you guys recently had an AppSumo deal going, and that's how I got on board with the plugin, because I'd heard about this plugin for several years actually, but it wasn't until recently that I actually checked it out and gave it a shot, and I was just like, man, I have been sleeping on this. This thing is amazing. And honestly, I know you've hinted at maybe in your website like your dry sense of humor, and even the name of the plugin, the EU Image Optimizer. I think the first time I heard the name, I was like, well, if it's called EU, do I really even want to check it out? If it's like, I didn't even think about, oh, what if it's an acronym? Because it is an acronym, right?
It is. It's an abbreviation for exactly WWW, which not super clever, but that was the original company name I came up with when I started doing web development years ago. So
yeah, I like it, sprinkling in the humor. And the SWIS plugin, I don't know if that's an acronym or not. Is it, or is it just SWIS? What's going on with that one?
Oh, that's a little bit of a joke between me and my cousin. Back when we were in college, we were hanging outside the cafeteria one day, and we saw these people wearing these shirts with acronyms on them, and we're like, what in the world does that mean? We're like, we should make our own shirts that have random acronyms that drive people nuts. And SWIS was one of those, with just one S at the end instead of two. And so when I was getting ready to name our performance plugin, I thought, oh, that would be just such a fun throwback to call it SWIS. And so what it is, you can come up with whatever acronym you want, but it doesn't actually have a meaning.
Yeah, nice. I like it. And at first I was like, maybe it's like a Swiss Army knife, but maybe the S is
it
left
is a
off
little
or
bit of
something.
that. I mean, it definitely has that to it. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things you could come up with on that, I'm sure, but I haven't come up with one that I love. But someday maybe I'll give it a real meaning. But for now, it's just SWIS.
Well, I'll let you, if I come up with any, retroactive acronym that might apply, I will let you know and see if see if you take my pitch.
Right on.
Yeah. So just to give context for everyone, I wanted to have Shane on to talk about his image optimization and performance plugins because I've just put out, as of yesterday, this is recording here on August 10th, 2021. So just yesterday on the 9th, pushed out the Holy Grail WordPress site speed course through Holy Grail WP. That's kind of been my little side project for a while. And we really go into all things WordPress performance. And in that course, I originally had some other plugin in mind that I was thinking of featuring when it came to the image stuff in particular. But I got that AppSumo deal and started checking out the plugin and was just like, oh, wow, okay, change of plans. This is now going to be the image optimization plugin I kind of used to demonstrate some things within the course. And so just because I think it does things so well for what needs to be done when it comes to optimizing images for WordPress. So now that plugin is kind of at the center of some of the things that I teach in the course. And I thought, who better to maybe give a little sneak peek just behind your methodology, your approach to WordPress performance as far as images go, and then also SWIS. I mean, so I'd love to just get to chat with you some. I've just got a few questions in mind that I wanted to ask you about. So one was like, I know I don't consider myself a developer by no means. I write no custom anything. I just keep Googling stuff and it keeps working. That's what I keep telling people. So I'm just a WordPress dude. But what was your first introduction to WordPress web development? Like, did you ever use any other CMS platforms, or how did you get into just this ecosystem?
Sure. I first got into, well, web development in the very loosest sense of hand coding HTML way back almost before WordPress existed, um, around 2003, 2004, I think. Um, so right around the time WordPress launched, and heard about WordPress in 2005, as I was looking around for blogging software because I was tired of hand coding HTML and CMS.
Mm.
And so
But it's
I
so
checked it.
exciting.
It's one of the cool things about it is that you can build stuff in a matter of minutes and have it show up on a screen. And that's kind of cool. And that I think was what hooked me. I had come from a little more traditional programming background with C++, where you had to write the code and then go compile it and hope you didn't have any errors, and then run it and finally get to see the product of your work. But HTML was just type a line of code and refresh your browser, and there you go. And so that was really cool, for me anyway at the time. And then in 2006, I actually fired up my first WordPress install, and still to this day have my own personal blog running on WordPress from 2006. And
But you're kidding.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
So
What
it was
version is
on,
that?
I believe the first install was on version 1.6,
Wow.
which is just, yeah, I go back and look at that every once in a while. I'm like, oh, wow, how far have we come? It's amazing. Uh,
I, I don't know what that would look like. You have to send me a screenshot or something, because I can only imagine what the back end might look like.
it was right around the time when plugins were first being introduced. So I don't even think themes were much of a thing at the time. And I mean, there was some, but yeah, it was, yeah, not anything like it is now. And so I tinkered around with it here and there, but at the college where I was working, we were using Joomla for a
Mhm.
while, and that definitely worked better as a CMS at the time. WordPress was still mostly blogging software back in that age. And then I went to work for another college here in my hometown in 2008, and we moved their website from, oh, what, I can't even remember the name of it. It was some Adobe software. It wasn't Dreamweaver, but it was some like cousin to that or something, I think. But it was hokey and weird, and we moved it over to Drupal. And so I got my hands wet with Drupal. Did a little bit of PHP here and there, not much. But then I think it was 2011, maybe somewhere in there, um, we were trying to figure out how to build our college application online. And so I dug into a textbook that I found from like 5 years previous that someone had been teaching that taught PHP and MySQL, and taught myself that and
Hmm.
built an application. It was pretty crazy. It was not very good, honestly. Like, just thinking back, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't go into detail on that. But then 2012, I was looking to start doing web development as a business, doing websites for small businesses and stuff. Started out with a couple businesses around town here, and my in-laws greenhouse business, and our church website. And somewhere in there, I thought, I should do something with speed on these sites. And I think I already kind of had that background from articles I had read on back then. We would hear, stuff about Amazon where they had shaved off like 1/10 of a second and made another $1 million or something ludicrous like that, and so you always wanted your website to be fast because you made more money. And so I wanted to make sure these sites were fast and started digging into image optimization at the recommendation, I think, of it. One of the tools back then, one of the main tools was YSlow, developed by Yahoo. And so started looking for a WordPress plugin. I thought there's got to be something. I had been using command line stuff at the college to optimize our images, but I thought there's got to be a plugin, surely. And there was, sort of, and they were both terrible.
So I take it you wanted to scratch your own itch and figured if it doesn't exist, I'll just make it myself. At least that's how I hear a lot of people come up with their plugins.
Yeah, so it was pretty much, it was, I saw this need because at that time the two were WP Smush, or was that the name? I don't know if that was the name of it back then. I think it had a different name.
Was Smush originally a Yahoo library or something? There was, I forget the exact origins because WP Dev took it later, but it started as something
there was
else.
a Smush It API, which is what that plugin used, that was hosted by Yahoo. I'm not quite sure if it was actually developed by Yahoo employees. I think it might have technically been, just people that knew people at Yahoo, and Yahoo took it on as kind of a side project. And part of they integrated in with their YSlow testing tool that you could run on your site, which was slick at the time. And the problem with the plugin wasn't that it was a crappy plugin, it was that it depended on Yahoo's servers to work. And the API was just abysmal. It timed out all the time. Sometimes there'd be huge outages, and I was just like, no, that's not all right. That's not going to be any fun trying to optimize images that way. And I think even in the first day that I was trying it, they were having issues, and I was like, oh, forget that.
Yeah, bad first impression.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other one, which got me going in the right direction, or at least the direction that I thought would be a more reliable solution, was the CW Image Optimizer, and it used command line tools, much like the free version of EYO does today. And so I forked that plugin, which was itself a fork of WP Smush, and revamped it to use command line tools that I could compile on Bluehost, which totally shocked me that I could actually compile tools on a shared web host like that, but they had the tools installed, so I did it.
Yeah.
And it worked. So it was pretty cool.
Oh yeah. So, there are several popular image optimization plugins today, and, WP Dev's Smush. I know the free version is a really popular one, as is Short Pixel. I know is a very popular one. And I'm in several online groups with photographers, and it seems everybody likes to go with Short Pixel and use the paid version, which operates off of a credit system, where you have to buy, credits in batches of however many you might need. And so you run your images through, and when initially thinking about, okay, if I'm going to spend money on a premium image optimization plugin, just the thought of credits didn't sit well with me. I've always been the type that would rather, if I can pay for something once and then just have it, I don't mind even if it's a little more expensive on the front end than the comparable alternative. And so I was kind of in between checking out Short Pixel and then discovered you, and was just like, okay, AppSumo deal, got it. So that developer license is just amazing. And so I'd love to, I guess, get your thoughts on, so when it came to getting into your own image optimization plugin, you identified there were some plugins already out there, but they weren't really doing the things that you wanted to do. So when you first started looking at what features you wanted to kind of bake into your plugin, I mean, what were some of those first features? I mean, was it resizing images? Was it compression? Like, where did you begin?
Sure. At the very beginning, it was just pure compression. And that's really all that existed at the time, for the most part. We were using JPEG, Tran, Optiping, and Gifsicle, and that was all lossless compression. So it didn't always save you a ton, but it at least got rid of the the extra baggage that images could be carrying around, especially when they were coming out of Photoshop. We had at the college I was working at, the logo ended up being 700 kilobytes, and 600 kilobytes of that was metadata and
Yeah.
thumbnail versions of the image itself embedded in the image metadata. It was just like,
Oh, wow.
why? What in the world? And so, yeah, and what made me even discover that was our PR gal who had created the file was attaching it to her email. And back then, of course, we didn't have 30 gigs of storage on Google or whatever. So you really had to pay attention to your email size. And she was sending, every time she sent out an email, her signature had that logo 700K. And then the person would reply and it would include that logo again, and then again, and you'd end up with a 10 megabyte email, and it was insane. So yeah, it's just like, oh no, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
Like, why
So
is this email
some
so heavy?
yeah. So typically, it was 8 to 10% savings that we were seeing, but sometimes, especially on pings or those huge bloated images out of Photoshop, we were getting 70 to 90% compression out of them. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is awesome. And so I know one of my favorite features, because I have not used just the free version of You yet. I've just, gone straight in and have been using the easy image optimizer CDN. Curious if you can talk about that some, because to me, at least, it seems like the most hands-off solution to where if a user can get it set up, if they can get, just turn the thing on, which is not difficult, but if they can turn it on, there's so much that is done for the user just on the fly without them really having to do a whole lot. And I know there are, different levels of compression that you can apply, and every, image is served WebP on the fly if the browser is compatible, the auto resizing. There is so much that is done for you on the fly. Can you talk about how the CDN came about and how you determined all those features that you were going to just have automated just to make it that much easier for users to get their images optimized?
Sure. And a lot of it came out of image optimization not being easy. The compression stuff was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You just turned it on and that worked. But then you had the WebP stuff, and that was a nightmare. Still is if you're not using EasyIO. And there were and the other thing that I really wanted to tackle with it and could not figure out for the life of me for the longest time was kind of the auto resizing, the auto scaling part of image optimization. And because we kept seeing, we could help people with their image compression and we were nailing that, but then they would run a Google speed test and they'd go, it says I need to scale my images and I can save like all this space. So I'm like, yeah, you got to do this and this and that. And it was just horrible. And so when I finally put the pieces together, part of that was looking a little bit at what Jetpack was doing with their Photon CDN. Except that hadn't even really occurred to me until I had the idea to do it. And then I was like, oh wait, they're doing that. But they weren't doing it quite as well as they could have been. And so that was the foundation of EasyIO, was taking Photon and improving it, making the auto scaling more accurate, making the compression more, making it less lossy. A lot of times they would take an image that they weren't even resizing and they would recompress it again with just the standard, JPEG compression, not even doing any of the fancy tools that we're using. They were just flat out just recompress it at quality 85 or quality 80, whatever it was. And it was like, that's not okay. So yeah, it was basically taking that and then so making the resizing simpler, And then of course that made compression simpler because you just turned it on and it's auto compressing all of your images, which was super slick. And then a year or two down the road, we were able to get WebP support implemented with the CDN that we were using. And at the time that was Key CDN. Now we're using Bunny CDN, and I take that back. They didn't implement it first. Bunny CDN implemented it like a year before I switched to them in like a day when I was chatting with them on some tech thing. They're like, oh yeah, I think we can do that. And they just went and did it. I was like, okay, that's cool.
BRB, let me invent something real quick.
Pretty much. I mean, it was crazy. So then about a year later, I was still feeling the itch. Like if we could do WebP automatically on the CDN, that would just be amazing. And so we switched to Bunny CDN eventually, and that was one of the big drivers for that. And yeah, it's the easiest way, because the best way of any method to serve them is using server-based rewrites instead of messing with their HTML or using JavaScript. You want just done at the server level. When you're putting everything through a CDN, you can do that. So it was pretty slick.
Yeah, and that's such a cool feature, again, because it eliminates the potential for the user to, maybe get some manual step wrong, or just it saves the user, I think, a lot of time and troubleshooting and just like, oh, I'm not sure if I did this or that right. But if it's just, hey, let me turn on this CDN and get all of these benefits, literally just whatever little check boxes I've got turned on, it's like just turning on the, hey, I want my website faster button, boom, and then it's there. So I think it's an incredible feature. And Bunny, I've been really impressed with the Bunny CDN. I know that there are, or there's at least one other plugin right now. I don't know if you're familiar with Flying Press by Gijo at WP
Yeah.
Speed Matters. And he has got what he calls Flying CDN. So he's got some partnership with Bunny as well, where he's doing some of the, images being served, WebP and that kind of thing. But I'm not sure how similar, the two CDN options might be. But did you have to coordinate with Bunny to, get some things working to your specifications? Like, how did that kind of partnership and just that whole integration come together? Or is it just something kind of out of the box that they had kind of ready to go?
Yeah, for the most part, it really just worked out of the box. It seems like at the beginning there were some things, as far as automation with their API that weren't quite lined up the way we needed, and there was an option or two that I wanted to use for our customers that you could do, but it wasn't on the API, so that we could do it automated. So there's some of those things that they implemented because it just made sense for them. Well, duh, we have this feature, why don't we put it on the API for all of our people that are at scale to make use of it? And so yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much out of the box Bunny CDN with our custom, the options that we feel are the best for the widest range of sites, and we just went with it. And so yeah, there's Flying Press. I didn't remember that one, but I had this feeling like there was one more that I was forgetting, because I was talking with Adam about that earlier, our support guy, because WP Compress uses Bunny, and Short Pixel's AI system, which is basically similar to our EasyIO, also uses Bunny. So yeah, there's, to my knowledge, there's four different platforms using Bunny for kind of the similar purpose, and they also run their own image optimization service off of their own platform too. So kind of 5 solutions.
Yeah, yeah. And what really, I don't even think I realized this at the time that I bought the developer's license, but it wasn't until I was originally configuring the thing that I saw a little checkbox for allowing EasyIO to serve all assets. And I was like, what? This isn't just images? Like you can have your CSS and JavaScript and fonts and that kind of thing all run through that. I was like, that's pretty impressive. So was that feature, was that something that came later, or initially when the CDN came about, did you guys just say like, hey, it's there, let's give everybody the option to just have all their files served by the CDN.
Yeah, within probably a few months of launching EasyIO originally, I had a guy say, well, you're delivering images. What would it take to do JavaScript and CSS? So then you could automatically gzip that stuff. And it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Because again, at the time we were using CDN, and they had a one-click deal where you just turned on gzip and off you go. And I was like, that'd be pretty slick. And so, yeah, worked on that and got it to where it was doing JavaScript, CSS, fonts, pretty much all assets. There were a few that we discovered that, oh, can't send that through there, notably some PHP endpoints, because you don't want those cached.
Mm.
And then video doesn't go through there very well, so we block that unless someone requests it. Then we can do a custom config and it works. But yeah, so it's been pretty sweet. And then along the way, we added automatic minification in there, so that it's stripping out the white space and making sure the files are not just compressed, but also as small as they can be, even pre-compression. So
yeah,
it was a pretty it was a no-brainer, really. Once I got to thinking about it, it took us, and that was kind of the first step to going outside of images, because up until that point it was just, we do images and that's what we do.
yeah. So at that point, if you guys weren't already, like, if you weren't already thinking about, making your own kind of separate performance plugin, which is now SWIS, was it at that point that you started getting curious about, like, okay, well, if we're handling some JavaScript, CSS for people in the image optimization plugin, like, what could we do with those assets, separate from image optimization? So I guess I'm bridging now into, like, so when did you start getting into the performance aspects that SWIS covers, and, deciding to branch over into that plugin?
Sure. So, from the very beginning when I started my business, I didn't want to just do images. Of course, I mentioned I was looking at site performance as a whole. And so I had been doing, using various plugins, used Auto Optimize, used WP Rocket, probably a few others, different caching plugins and whatnot. And over the years had kind of settled on what I was comfortable with. But then when I switched to WP Engine, I couldn't use WP Rocket anymore. Of course, that's changed, but at the time that was a no-go, because they didn't allow any caching plugins on their platform. And so I started taking some of those functionalities, and I had to go do it with this plugin or that plugin, or some things I had hand coded. And then sometime, last spring, I think it was, I was looking at all the stuff that I'd built, and I had already started to work on a JavaScript, or like an asynchronous or deferred JavaScript module for EasyIO. And I thought, man, I've got all this stuff built. What would it take to fill in the gaps here and make it a whole performance plugin? And so that's kind of where that started. And it's only not even a year old technically right now. I think it was last September when we launched it. So yeah, that was kind of the impetus. Was I got all these tools, why not put them together so everyone else can use them?
Yeah, and how kind of you to offer that. That's great. One of the more exciting / dangerous features that's rolled out with WP Rocket recently has been this remove unused CSS functionality. So, and I know that is something that SWIS also does. So, and I know I watched a video on your YouTube channel recently where you were showing, just in DevTools, Chrome DevTools, how you can use your, what's the specific tool where you were looking to see what assets were being used, what percentage of.
Yeah, I think they call it the coverage tab
Coverage.
or coverage console, whatever. It's
That's
the coverage
right.
tool anyway in the DevTools there.
Yeah,
I
I was
kind
gonna
of
say
bury
console.
the
Was like
poor thing because
console
it's
something.
really cool, but it's kind of
Yeah.
buried.
Yeah, I'd never seen that until your video just, yesterday or so. And yeah, so for those that don't know, can you tell us just a little bit about what that coverage tool does. And did that play a role at all in how you went about configuring your plugin to detect what CSS is used on a page, and then trying to remove that? And just how does one remove CSS without breaking things, hopefully?
And that is the trick. And so
Yeah.
WP Rocket, of course, is being pretty ambitious trying to automatically do it, and we don't. We let you have the full power to disable any CSS file, any JavaScript file. But at this point, so it's similar. If people have used something like assets, or what's it called?
Asset cleanup.
That one, Asset Cleanup Pro. The C was not coming to me. So if you've used that, it's a similar feel to that. You have a front end panel that shows you all the JavaScript and CSS files that are loaded on any given page, and you can customize it. You can nuke something site wide. You can nuke it on all your pages except one, or you can only load it on, like if you have a contact form, notably like contact form 7 loads its CSS and JavaScript everywhere. So if you don't like that, which is not a good thing, you can go to your contact form page and say, hey, I just want this stuff to load here. Get rid of it everywhere else. And SWIS will do that for you. So that's kind of a slick deal. Doing it automatically kind of blows my mind right now, but I'm curious because I did see, WP Rocket launch that recently. I'm kind of curious to see, okay, what are they doing? How are they doing it? Is it working?
I know it's got to be the source of a lot of support tickets, because it is the
I
source of a lot of gripe
imagine.
in their Facebook group.
I'm sure. I mean, because how in the world do you come? Well, and here's kind of the fundamental problem with doing something like that automatically. And I've thought about how to do that. But you look at something like the coverage tab or the coverage tool, whatever you want to call it. And when you look at that, what it's showing you is this, it'll show you this little bar next to every file that's red or blue, depending on how much of that file is being used on the page. And you might go down and go, oh, hey, this one's all red, but it's only showing you the stuff that is applied so far. If you scroll down your page, it might use some of that CSS. It might use, and my child decided she needed to come see me.
I'm surprised mine hasn't come to see me yet. I'm not kidding. He has I have a 3-year-old, and he likes to make an appearance occasionally.
So anyway, yeah, that's kind of the problem with any of those tools, and even Google's PageSpeed or GTmetrix, when they're talking to you about remove unused JavaScript, they're not saying that it's never used anywhere. They're saying it's not used above the fold. Or in the case of the coverage tool, it's how much have you scrolled, how much have you clicked on stuff. And so it'll change dynamically as you click on stuff, as you scroll, as you interact with the page. And so it's a really tricky thing to even look at from that perspective on the manual side of things, let alone to try and do it automatically. Is kind of incredible. Now, one of the thoughts I've had is to take and just scrape a page, grab all the CSS, and just compare the rules and go, okay, does this rule apply? Does this rule apply? But that means building a CSS parser, a full-blown HTML parser, and that gets really complicated. So I'm really
above my head.
really curious to see what in the world WP Rocket is doing, because that's ambitious.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, which I've been wrong about many things in life, but if I'm not mistaken, they might do something very similar to that, and I think Flying Press might do something similar, where they actually will render your pages like in a Chrome browser on some other server somewhere, and with the page actually rendered, that's where they both determine their page caching, but also I think that's where some of the initial scanning is done for, okay, what CSS selectors are present on the page,
Sure.
to then compare that against, the CSS file that's loaded on the page, and say, well, whatever selectors aren't present on the page itself, let's just, nuke those out of the, page CSS, and then create only the used CSS file for that page. But again, a lot of room for a lot of potential for breakage there. And if it's anything like the delay JavaScript functionality that came out with WP Rocket 3.9 point. Well, the most stable version, I think, was at 3.9.0.5. Yeah. Like was the first, like this one's pretty steady. You know, so many people writing in the Facebook group and everything that this broke my site and this broke my site. And because it's painting with broad strokes, you know, it's just, hey, let's delay everything and hope for the best. But they're building a whitelist of, you know, hey, we know certain plugins, just this isn't going to work for, or maybe it's even just certain JavaScript files out of a plugin. It might not be the whole plugin, but it's like, hey, we at least need to make an exclusion list here. So there's a, in their documentation now, they've just got this growing whitelist that I'm sure support is adding to week by week, just as people write in of, you know, hey, this or that isn't working. So, and maybe something similar is being done with, you know, other just common plugins. Like if there's something that's maybe dynamically injecting CSS classes on scroll or something, there's some kind of magic happening there, but it's still pretty, a pretty crazy feat. But I do like that SWIS has that, the ability to be so hands-on and fine-tuning things. Would that be anything you'd care to maybe demonstrate for us? Would you like to show off a little, either something in SWIS, and you know how you might manually you know, disable a file or something like that? I know contact form 7 is kind of a classic example to pick on when it comes to the, hey, this loads on every page whether you need it or not.
That's it's actually something that I need to do my own video on too, as kind of a demonstration. But yeah, I'll give it a whirl here. Let's see, share my screen. That should, it's not giving me any. Oh, this could be trouble.
Let's see,
because it's one. Oh, I don't have permissions on here yet. That's fun.
Like on your device altogether?
Yes.
Hey, that's fine. That's cool. We can, I'll link to the video underneath this one when it's posted, about your SWIS video where you are showing some of that.
Yeah, I'll have to do a separate video on that. Shoot, I was gonna share some of that tonight too, unless usually, yep, I'm not gonna tell it to quit and reopen.
It could be dangerous doing it live. Well, yeah, so maybe
unless you really want me to, but
yeah, we don't have to worry with it for now. But yeah, everybody go check out that video. It'll be linked below here. But would you maybe, I want to maybe come back to the Image Optimizer and the different levels of compression is, you know, I do work with several different photographers, and just again in some groups with photographers, and of course super, you know, particular about their image quality.
Absolutely.
Let's see, retina screens can be a big issue, because I know sometimes if you're working on a website and you don't have a retina screen, but let's say your client does have a retina screen, you could have maybe compressed images and done things and they look perfectly clear on your screen, but the client is on a retina screen, and therefore they're seeing something and they're just saying, you know, gosh, it's pixelated, it doesn't look quite, you know, the quality's gone down, what happened? How let's see, that could be a tricky question, but like if you're not on a retina screen, how can you make sure that you're optimizing images that are going to look good on a retina screen, even if you can't test it on your own device? That's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is, and that's part of the beauty of EasyIO. When we first built it, it was just using a lot of back end kind of guesswork based on some core WordPress functions. But then a year or two later, we added our own lazy loader that allowed us to go through when each image is loaded and make it the exact size that the browser wants it to be. And so that was pretty slick. And that included being able to scale those images up for Retina and high DPI devices, if, of course, the original had enough pixels to start with. But that's kind of one of the main goals with my plugin and probably others, is that we want the compression to be good enough that that's not even an issue. I know some others, you know, like Short Pixel has their glossy setting, which would probably be suitable for that, but then they have their super high end one. I can't remember what they call it. It might just be lossy, but I think they have a different name. Can't remember. Anyway, but yeah, that's not going to look good on a Retina screen. We get a lot of feedback about, oh yeah, your guys' compression is so much better than that. And compared to that, yes, compared to their glossy, it's pretty similar. And so that's been one of my things from the very beginning. I even resisted lossy compression altogether. Originally, I was like, no, I want it to be lossless. I don't want to lose any quality. But then I saw what some of the more high-end tools could do, and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty good. Especially on most of them, I couldn't tell the difference between the original and the compressed version. I was like going, well, I guess we got a winner.
Yeah.
So
And that's the cool thing
so
about
that I
the really
think
good
is,
compression.
yeah, that's one of the important things that helps. So again, short pixels, high end settings, probably one to be avoided if you're, working with a photographer, or if you are a photographer, or you got a client that's super nitpicky about detail. Bump it up a little bit and you'll do all right. Avoid plugins like Resmush It. They're just doing a flat compression with JPEG Optim, and it's not very high quality. So there's an image optimization plugin can kind of hamstring you there, or it can be your best friend. But yeah,
So
that's, for the most part, if you keep the image quality out of the box, just keep it at the WordPress default or better, most people will never notice. In fact, I think their threshold that they tested was about 10 times better than the paper that they cited with the rationale for that quality level. So yeah, it's a pretty conservative setting even to start with.
yeah, so within you, like there's the Pixel Perfect and there's Pixel Perfect Plus that are both lossless. So if, let's say, someone is a photographer, they do want their images as sharp as possible. Are those the two settings you would say, hey, stick with those, or would there be any further, more serious level of compression they should consider, or that'd be it?
Even for someone like that, I usually will recommend that they give the premium options a try. Notably, the premium plus is usually a little better quality. Not that it changes less pixels, but visually they've put a lot of, it's actually using the tech from Tinify, the Tiny Ping and Tiny JPEG folks, and so they put a
Okay.
lot of work into fine-tuning that algorithm. They've really tried to focus in on images that have the sharp images, that have some really sharp lines where there's color contrast, and stuff where there's text overlays, and a lot of those do not compress well, and so they've really worked hard to try and make those compress better with their algorithms. So you can try either premium plus. They both should be nearly indistinguishable on normal photographs. It's really those ones where maybe they shouldn't even be in the JPEG format sometimes, but they are. And so for most photographers, you can use either of those and it's going to be pretty solid. And if it's not, just go use Pixel Perfect or Pixel Perfect Plus.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things with the API, is that you can try it out, and if it didn't work, go restore your images from backups. I always tell them, just do it on a few images, get comfortable with it before you go, doing your whole library. Try, take it
Right.
slow. Take it slow.
doing all your images. Yeah, and maybe talk about that real quick. Because you can use the local compression and resizing, messing with your images that are on your server. Can you talk about the difference between optimizing your images locally versus letting the CDN handle all of that? Like, does the CDN adjust or alter your original images, or is it doing its own thing with its own copy? What's going on there?
Sure, and that's one of the kind of cool things with the CDN, is that it doesn't alter your original images on your server at all. Whereas the compress API, it does. It's going to compress and overwrite the existing images. We do have that 30-day backup window as long as you leave those enabled. But Yeah, so that's kind of a downside, but for some people, they want to save storage space, so it's a huge win to be able to compress their local images. So that's what our API does, otherwise known as our compress API. Super creative, I know, that's me. um, and then the CDN, the beauty of that is it lets you try out, some of the WebP compression options without risking anything on your local site. So you can turn it on, you can adjust the quality level, you can mess around with it, and see if it works for you. And so that's one of the things I really love about EasyIO. And then if once you get that where you're comfortable, then it's easy to go and be like, oh yeah, I'll just go compress my local images now too.
Yeah, once you're for sure happy with the compression level. And I know that it is far less common today that somebody, happens to not have access to a backup of their site to where they could, should something go wrong or they're not happy with the bulk compression they did and they can just
Oh
roll back.
goodness.
Yeah, because I mean, most hosts offer, server level backups, just standard now. But I remember a few years ago when it was either like you have to pay for extra, you pay extra for backups, or you better be using your own backup plugin or be taking them down manually yourself. And I remember some occasions a few years back where I might have run a bulk optimization and just be like, oh no. And so now, yeah, being able to just say, hey, let's let the CDN handle all of that. And if I don't like the compression level, I'll just revert to another one. No big deal. Nothing
Yep.
lost. So
Yep.
that's huge. I was just looking at my little list here to see, is there anything else that I had pre-written, and it doesn't look like it. When it comes to the approach that I'm taking in this course, out of the different modules that I have and just kind of teaching general just site optimization, so many people these days are kind of borderline panic, if not in full panic mode of, okay, core web vitals are out now. And it's, your site's performance and user experience is starting to play some factor, some role in rankings and everything. So a lot of the Facebook groups I'm in and some online communities, people have just kind of been like, what do I do? Yeah, how do I get in the green? And more often than not, desktop score is going to be great if you're doing like page speed insights. People don't generally have too much difficulty getting good scores there. But being that page speed insights mobile test is using that simulated, throttled, I believe it's a 3G connection on an older mobile device. That score is usually much worse. And I have found that if you can get the CDN, get EasyIO running to where your images are served in WebP, they are auto resized and they are lazy loaded, then that mobile score, if everything else is in place, everything else is taken care of, then your images are not going to be your bottleneck. But so often people are like, why can't I get the score better? And it's like the clustering of those three things. And if you can just deliver those smaller image files, lazy loaded, and auto resize for, mobile, that cleans up so many people's mobile test result. So it really is like the secret sauce. Like the CDN is amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
When you yourself are testing websites, do you have a preferred testing tool outside of like Chrome DevTools, or is there any other browser based website, some tests, some website you go through to test sites?
Sure. And it's funny you mentioned the dev tools, because I did just release a video on doing your own speed tests with the dev tools, because that's ultimately the best and quickest way just to double check the speed test sites, because sometimes they might be overloaded, or there's any number of things. I've run back-to-back page speed insights tests and got totally different results. And it's like, really? Come on, Google.
Thought you were supposed to be more googly than this. Come on.
Yes, you would think. But one of the biggest problems with testing any of the image optimizers that has a CDN on page speed insights is the idea that now your images are being delivered through a network of servers, and each one of them needs a copy of your images, and they're only going to get that if they've been used before. So in other words, if you've had traffic from that location, then they'll have a copy. If you haven't, and Google tests from that location, they had to go through the CDN, through our optimization cluster, all the way back to your server, and then all the way back up the chain. And that's just terrible. So we prefer GTmetrix almost exclusively for the reason, well, because it used to be way more awesome than PageSpeed Insights. Now it's still good, but they're using a lot of the same metrics now. But big reason is because it lets you set the testing location. And so that way you're always testing from the same exact spot. Then you know you got to run it, because I'm using a CDN, so I got to run it 4 or 5, maybe 6 times. And then you should have a nice clean test result, and you should look at your waterfall view and see everything go right down the middle, and everything's just awesome and fast. So that's what you're kind of looking for on that. And yeah, and the waterfall is a really slick feature of GTmetrix too, because you don't see that. You have no visibility into any of that with page speed. So you don't know, did they get cached images? Did they get uncached images? Really no idea there. So
yeah, and I think maybe web page test is one of the only other tools that I think has a legible enough waterfall that's because it is kind of dated looking. It is it's not the most current. They've updated some things about that site, but it's still it could use some love in the waterfall category. Have you this one I've only recently come across, waterfaller.dev? Do you use that one?
I've not used that one.
It's a
one.
pretty user friendly waterfall, because it will actually tell you in just plain language, like line by line. Like you can click a given HTTP request, and it'll tell you what that one is, what you're supposed to do with it. If there's some kind of, like, if it's, hey, this one's a culprit and slowing down your page, it'll tell you why. I mean, it's very and it's a pretty one. It looks good, and it's good at just kind of telling you, hey, here's what needs to be done here if you want to improve your score. So it kind of comes with this little helper messages, which is nice. And then I don't know how frequently you like to test speed, like worldwide, but using a CDN and everything, that is a benefit that if your website is accessed from somewhere else in the world, that you should still get pretty good performance. And like the whole Holy Grail speed course came from this. It was about a little over a year ago now. I wrote a blog post and I just called it something about the Holy Grail, like site speed thing. Got my website to load 1 second or less anywhere in the world. And it's this combination of using Cloudflare name servers and using WP Rocket and Perf Matters. That's kind of the original secret sauce there. But for testing website performance worldwide, up until last year, .com tools was one of the only tests I knew of that would let you test from like 20 plus locations worldwide, to actually be able to see what's your time to first byte, what's the onload fully loaded time in all these different data centers around the world. But sometime within the last 6 months, they've chopped it down to now, like on a free account, you can see like 3 locations. And I think if you sign up on a free account, you can get 5 if you give them your email address. But fast or slow is another kind of newer tool. It's made by the same team at WordFence, and that's a really pretty test too. I think it gives you like 18 locations worldwide for some of that similar stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that one just recently.
Yeah. So just when it comes to checking performance like around the world, that's a pretty fun one. But do you use any kind of testing tool for like seeing how like the EasyIO CDN is behaving like across different sites around the world, like for a given like one website you're testing? Like, is that ever anything that you are looking at yourself?
Usually I'm just working on one-off tests, and so like if we've got a customer having issues down in India, I'll go grab GTmetrix and tell it to go test from Mumbai, or if they're in Australia, I'll go have them test from Sydney or something like that. So usually it's more specific. I don't generally do too much worldwide testing. I did want to mention the one thing we found out on the WordFence test is, well, and we kind of knew this internally, but when they do their location tracking to see like, hey, where are your assets being delivered from in relation to the visitor, it's not super accurate. And so one of
Okay.
the reasons for that is that IP location databases, they're focused on the end user. So they're really, really good at telling you where your customers are. They're really, really bad at telling you where servers are. So yeah, kind of a
Mm,
weird anomaly that we've had to deal with our own providers on that, where most of the time they get it right, and then sometimes it's just like the data's right there. Why can't you go get that? And they're
yeah.
telling
Yeah.
you it's like well, Bunny CDN, I guess, and I don't know what location provider they're using, but Bunny CDN is headquartered in Europe, and so someone was running a test from Australia, and it said, "Oh, your images are being delivered from Europe, clear to Australia." And no, they weren't. They were being delivered from Sydney.
Yeah.
But their test couldn't tell that because
Interesting.
the location database was giving them wrong results.
Right. I wonder too, because I do with my approach a lot of times have people using Cloudflare's name servers, and if you're proxying through Cloudflare, of course the origin IP is masked.
Masked, yep.
I wonder if that or people using VPNs, I mean that could maybe gunk something up there, but I don't know. Thinking out loud.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and
Cloudflare definitely throws a wrinkle into location tracking for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of Cloudflare, so this is maybe to kind of start winding things down for us. My initial outreach to you guys, I remember I reached out to support because I was experimenting with Cloudflare's APO service. And for those not familiar, that's what it's automatic platform optimization. And they rolled that out for WordPress, the WordPress CMS specifically, a few months ago, which is basically just, I mean, Cloudflare has had caching before, and you could set up page rules to cache like the HTML of your pages, around all their data centers um, around the world. But APO came out, and they're basically saying like, "Hey, we'll just take all of your assets and load them all from Cloudflare." And when I reached out to support, I was like, "Hey, so I'm checking out the EasyIO CDN, and I'm seeing that all my assets could be served from there. But I've also been interested in trying out APO. Like, which one do I do? Are they almost similar?" So, like in that sense of, hey, APO is trying to serve all of your assets. Is it virtually from that standpoint, like, hey, all your assets are being served by CDN? Is that a pretty similar thing between the two? Because ultimately, the response came back from support, like, yeah, let's not have APO installed if we're using the EasyIO CDN. Um, is that a similar situation? Would they be a similar comparison at all, aside from the images maybe not being served WebP on the fly and everything?
Sure. And that's the image is probably the biggest difference there. And we can work on top of Cloudflare. And so that's not usually a problem. The main concern we had, and APO is so new that we don't really know yet because we haven't had a lot of people using that yet with our solutions. But with SWIS and it doing stuff locally and being a page caching plugin also, um, we would have had some duplication. And like with you already had a license for that, and so why go pay for something extra when you've already got that? But it can be a win, because instead of with SWIS, you're just caching pages to your local server. The nice thing with APO is that it's caching the pages globally, which is kind of cool if you do have a global audience. So
Yeah, I dig it. I know I've been kind of all over the place with my questions as they just kind of come to me. So let's say maybe final thing, because this is something I talked about with Brian Jackson at Perf Matters. I asked him kind of the difference between the way that Perf Matters handles lazy loading of images, videos, iframes compared to WP Rockets. And I know within EU, there's the options to toggle on things like lazy loading placeholder images or the low quality placeholder images. So there's just some really interesting lazy loading features in you. Can you just tell me about what's so unique about the way that you guys approach lazy loading? Because that's honestly one of the most intriguing things to me about the plugin as a whole. Just those are really handy settings.
mhm. A lot of that comes from the functionality where EasyIO is getting dynamic dimensions fed to it from the lazy loader. And so in order to do that, we had to have placeholders that represented or that held the space of the actual image instead of just the traditional little tiny 1x1 pixel placeholders. We need something that was real image sized. And so we experimented around with some different things. We tried SVG placeholders, which we still have as an option, but there are some themes that those don't work with. So there's that, which is just a little inline SVG snippet, which is pretty slick the way SVGs work. So just puts the dimensions in there and you have a nice placeholder for it. And then the other one that, to my knowledge, no one else is doing is blank ping placeholders. And that's kind of our default option. And the release tomorrow is going to make them even faster and better because they'll be inlined instead of fetching them separately. And those improve upon the SVGs in the fact that they're actual images with set dimensions. SVGs, the problem was that they would scale.
Right.
They would keep their aspect ratio, but depending on the theme, depending on the space they were in, you might call it a 100 by 300. But if the space was big enough, it would go up to 300 by 900. And so it did crazy things like that. But if you make a 100 by 300 ping, that's all it can be. So that's one of the funnest things we've done with the ping placeholders. And I'm really excited for the release tomorrow. It's going to be fun. Could be a little crazy. Who knows? Stuff might break, but we'll ride the wave and see what happens. And then there are the LQIP, the low quality image placeholders, that are kind of a fun little take on that. And so if the image is within certain dimensions, so if it's super tiny, we're just going to give you a single color placeholder, basically taking an average of the image. And if it's too big, then that processing just gets crazy because we're using the Gaussian blur, and it's just ludicrous for performance. But yeah, it just generates basically a blurry version of the image, just letting people know, hey, something's coming, hold on, we're working on it. And then your image pops in and everyone's happy. And we've tried to make, so that's not even as much of an issue. We've increased the viewport threshold a little bit more, kind of a middle ground in between what some plugins are doing and what Google Chrome is doing natively, where it's like 2,000 or 3,000 pixels away from the viewport, it's already loading images. Ours is about 1,000 pixels. So we've tried to help make it so that as people are scrolling, images are already loaded. They're not having to wait for stuff to load. They're not going, oh, well, there's a nice blank space. Wonder what that's for.
Which is kind of how WP Rocket's lazy loading works, because they're looking to deliver like the best, scores, but it does kind of give you that, hey, you either catch the image, you see it loading in, or you do see a white space for a while before it pops in. But hey, that lets them deliver a lighter page. So if you were only concerned with performance and not so much the user experience, then you might say, well, yeah, I want WP Rocket to lazy load my stuff. But otherwise, a little more conservative approach, kind of like you mentioned, is generally, that's what I would recommend. Let it be a better user experience versus absolutely going after speed first and foremost. And that's really cool, the SVG update, because I was going to actually mention, I do see so many people do, and myself included, I like to use a SVG for a header logo, and just for the scalability and staying nice and crisp and clean, no matter what size it is. But yeah, one of the Core Web Vitals metrics, that cumulative layout shift, if you have an SVG loading in and it's, all of a sudden jumping to its dimensions, then it gives you that warning. And so an easy way to fix it could be, well, I'll just switch out my SVG logo for, the PNG or something. But then you lose your, if you just want the really crisp, scalable logo, you lose that, but it'll score you better on the test results. So I've had clients where they want, the best score possible. And so if they've got an SVG logo, historically, just because there are some things that can try to add dimensions to an SVG, but it can be tough to do if you're not using something like what you've mentioned, the blank PNG placeholder. Like in the generate press theme, I know that there's in their forum, I remember seeing a post about SVG logos causing the cumulative layout shift, and there was some function provided by support that you could put into your functions PHP I didn't have it working on my site, but yeah, as soon as that release comes out tomorrow, I better believe I'm going to give that a shot and see if it'll treat my little SVG logo a little better. So that is super exciting. Well, let's see here. Shane, man, you have been very generous with your time, and it's been really fun getting to chat with you about all this stuff. And again, everyone watching, listening, there will be links below to some of Shane's resources, particularly some of the videos he's just put out in recent days, weeks. I've binged any of the videos on the channel here recently, and there's just a lot of really good, high quality stuff there. So, and be on the lookout. I might see if I can't get Shane to come and do a little something for us in the course or in the community. We'll talk about that after we kill the recording. But this may not be the last you see of Shane on the channel or within the course. So if you're looking for a place to just have a one-stop shop to learn about website optimization and just making your WordPress sites load faster and score well on Core Web Vitals, you definitely want to check out the Holy Grail WordPress Site Speed course. It is out. Link is below. Do yourself a favor and check it out. All right, Shane, thanks so much. And we'll pull this thing to a pause. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, been a pleasure.
All right, man. Thanks.